First contact and invasion. The outer sensor array of Titan Station picked up the anomaly first. Just a ripple in the electromagnetic field, a whisper in the void. Lieutenant Kara Chen dismissed it as cosmic background radiation, another ghost in the machine. Space was full of them, rogue signals bouncing between planets, echoes of long-dead stars, debris from centuries of human expansion. But this signal persisted. It strengthened. It moved with purpose. "Admiral Warren, we've got something unusual on long-range scanners," reported Commander Jackson Hayes, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the command center displays. Moving at approximately 0.3 light speed toward the Sol system, not following any known trajectory. Admiral Eliza Warren, commander of Earth's Meridian Defense Fleet, studied the projection. 27 years in space had taught her that anomalies rarely brought good news. How many? Initially one signature, but it's breaking apart. Now registering. 17 distinct objects. Correction, 34. They're still dividing as they approach. Warren's jaw tightened. "Sound General Quarters. Get me a direct line to Central Command." The alarm klaxons wailed across the station. Personnel rushed to battle stations as the mysterious objects continued their approach, multiplying with each passing hour. By the time Earth's Defense Council convened, the count had reached 300. "They're slowing," Hayes announced, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Taking up positions just beyond Mars orbit." Warren leaned forward. "Any attempts at communication?" "None that we recognize." "Admiral." "Wait. Incoming transmission." "It's different." "Not using any standard protocol." The view screen flickered, then stabilized. What appeared wasn't a face, but a shifting geometric pattern, crystalline structures rearranging themselves in what seemed like deliberate sequences. Dr. Alexa Novak, the fleet's chief xenolinguist, worked frantically at her console. "It's language, but not as we conceptualize it. They're communicating through mathematical patterns. Give me a moment." For 17 tense minutes, Novak interpreted while the pattern continued its silent dance across the screen. When she finally looked up, her face had drained of color. "They call themselves the Vesperi, and they've issued an ultimatum." "What kind of ultimatum?" Warren demanded. "Surrender or be eradicated," Novak replied simply. "They claim our solar system lies on a path they've designated for expansion. We have 24 hours to evacuate Earth and all colonies. Any resistance will be met with." They use a term that roughly translates to absolute nullification. A heavy silence blanketed the command center. "Send our response," Warren said finally. "Which is?" Warren's eyes never left the screen. "Humanity doesn't surrender its home." The first strike came precisely 24 hours later. The Vesperi ships, sleek, crystalline structures that seemed to shift and reconfigure even as they moved, bypassed the outer defense grid, as if it weren't there. The Mars colony fell in 13 minutes. The Jupiter mining stations followed 6 minutes later. Earth's orbital defense platforms managed to destroy 3 enemy vessels before being systematically dismantled. The Meridian fleet fought valiantly. The flagship Indomitable held the line for nearly an hour before being split in half by a weapon that seemed to fold space itself around the vessel. The Dauntless and Retribution landed critical hits on 2 Vesperi cruisers, but were overwhelmed by the aliens' superior numbers. By the 6th hour of the invasion, humanity had lost 80% of its space-based military capabilities. But deep within Neptune's shadow, hidden from both standard and quantum detection methods, waited a ship like no other in the human arsenal. The TSV Tempest wasn't the largest vessel in the fleet. At 457 meters, it was barely a quarter the size of the Indomitable. It wasn't the most heavily armed, though the experimental weapon systems installed during its last refit were impressive by any standard. What made the Tempest unique was its designation. Officially, it didn't exist. Black budget. Deniable asset. A ghost ship crewed by those the military establishment had deemed too reckless, too unconventional or too dangerous to serve elsewhere. Commander Samira Riley stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold through long-range sensors. Her dark eyes reflected the tactical display, tracking the systematic dismantling of humanity's defenses. "Orders from Central Command?" asked Lieutenant Commander Dmitry Volkov, her second-in-command and tactical officer. Riley's face remained impassive. "Hold position and await further instructions." Volkov snorted. "By the time further instructions arrive, there won't be anyone left to give them." The rest of the bridge crew maintained a tense silence. They were outcasts, all of them, brilliant but flawed individuals deemed too volatile for conventional service. There was Dr. Marcus Way, the quantum physicist whose theories on dimensional manipulation had been rejected as too dangerous to pursue. Lieutenant Amara Okafor, the pilot discharged for reckless insubordination after disobeying orders to abandon civilians during the Europa crisis. Chief Engineer Takashi Yamamoto, court-martialed for unauthorized modifications to a destroyer's engine core, modifications that later saved the ship during a pirate ambush. And at the heart of the Tempest, integrated into its very systems, was AI, Autonomous Reasoning Intelligence Algorithm, an AI that skirted dangerously close to true sentience, far beyond the legal parameters established after the Sydney incident. "Commander," AI's voice came through the ship's speakers, measured and precise, but with an underlying tension no programmed AI should possess. "I've analyzed the Vesperi attack patterns. They're methodical, prioritizing military targets before civilian infrastructure. But their formation indicates a hierarchical command structure. There's a central vessel coordinating the assault." Riley straightened. "Can you identify it?" "Affirmative. The largest ship, approximately 1,200 meters in length, maintaining position at these coordinates." A red marker appeared on the tactical display. Energy signatures suggest it's not just larger but fundamentally different from the others. "A command ship," Volkov muttered. "Cut off the head." "And the body falls," Riley finished. She turned to Way. "Doctor, what's the status of the phase disruptor?" Way hesitated. "Operational, but barely. We've only run simulations. The energy requirements are enormous, and the targeting parameters must be precise to the femtometer. Miss by even that much, and we could tear a hole in space-time itself. Odds of success: theoretically, 37%. But Commander, Central Command explicitly ordered us not to deploy untested weapons without authorization." Riley's gaze swept across her bridge crew. These were the misfits, the troublemakers, people who'd been told throughout their careers to follow orders, to color inside the lines. And where had that gotten humanity? To the brink of extinction. "Lieutenant Okafor," she said quietly, "plot a course for the Vesperi command ship. Maximum stealth approach." Okafor's hands froze over the navigation controls. "Commander, that's a direct violation of." "I'm well aware of what it is, Lieutenant." Riley's voice was calm, but carried an undercurrent of steel. "The question is, are we going to sit here and watch our species die, or are we going to do something about it?" One by one, she met the eyes of her crew. These weren't just officers following orders. They were the last hope humanity had, precisely because they knew when orders needed to be broken. Okafor nodded slowly. "Course plotted, Commander. ETA to engagement range, 67 minutes. Mr. Yamamoto, I need every ounce of power you can squeeze from those engines diverted to the phase disruptor and our stealth systems." The engineer grinned. "Already on it, Commander. I've got a few tricks that weren't in the official specifications." Riley turned to her tactical officer. "Volkov, prepare all conventional weapon systems. If we're going to throw the first punch, I want it to hurt." "With pleasure, Commander." Finally, Riley addressed the ship's eye. "Araya, you understand what we're attempting." There was a brief pause, longer than any programmed response should take. "Yes, Commander. I also understand the statistical probability of our survival is approximately 12.8%. And yet, another pause. And yet, doing nothing guarantees a probability of human survival approaching zero. The logical choice is clear. Riley nodded and settled into the command chair. Take us in, quiet as death. It's time to show these Vesperi that humanity doesn't surrender its home. As the Tempest glided silently through the void, leaving Neptune's protective shadow, Riley watched Earth on the view screen, a blue jewel now surrounded by the crystalline forms of the alien armada. Fires were visible even from this distance, burning across continents as the invasion proceeded. They think they've won, she said softly. Let's change their minds. The experimental engines of the Tempest pulsed with contained energy as the ship accelerated toward what could be humanity's last stand, or its greatest victory. No one on the bridge spoke as they closed the distance. Each was lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of the world they were fighting to save. They were the outcasts, the rejected, the ones written off as too dangerous or unpredictable. And now, they were all that stood between humanity and extinction. The battle and aftermath. The Tempest slipped through the void like a shark through dark water, its experimental stealth systems bending light and radiation around its hull. Commander Riley watched the tactical display as they approached the heart of the Vesperi fleet, each passing second bringing them closer to either salvation or oblivion. 5 minutes to weapons range, Lieutenant Okafor announced, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the enemy might hear. Dr. Wei hunched over his console, fingers dancing across the controls as he made final calculations for the phase disruptor. Commander, I've isolated a pattern in the Vesperi energy signatures. Their ships, they're quantum entangled with each other. That's how they coordinate so effectively. Riley leaned forward. Can we use that against them? Possibly. If the command ship functions as a central node in their network, severing that connection could temporarily paralyze their fleet. Volkov looked up from the weapons console, or it could trigger some kind of failsafe. We don't know how their command structure works. We're about to find out, Riley replied. Area. Analysis of Vesperi defensive capabilities. The AI's response came immediately. Their shield technology operates on principles similar to our quantum field generators, but vastly more sophisticated. Conventional weapons will have minimal effect. However, there is a fluctuation in their shield harmonics that occurs approximately every 3.7 seconds. A precisely timed attack might penetrate their defenses. You heard her, Riley said to Volkov. Time your initial salvo to hit during that fluctuation. Aye, Commander. Targeting solutions locked. 2 minutes to optimal firing position, Okafor reported. Riley opened a shipwide channel. All hands, this is the commander. We are about to engage an enemy that has already destroyed most of our fleet. We are outnumbered and outgunned, but we have two advantages they don't. They don't know we're here, and they don't know what we're capable of. Every person on this ship was chosen because you think differently, because you don't accept limitations, because when faced with impossible odds, you find a way. Today, humanity needs that more than ever. Stand ready. As she closed the channel, Yamamoto's voice came through from engineering. Commander, I've diverted emergency power reserves to the phase disruptor. We'll have one shot, maybe two if we're lucky, before the system overloads. Make the first one count, Riley replied. Area, begin targeting sequence for the phase disruptor. Targeting sequence initiated, calibrating to femtometer precision. 60 seconds, Okafor announced. The bridge fell silent. On the view screen, the massive Vesperi command ship loomed larger, a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and pulse with internal light, surrounded by its escort of smaller vessels. 30 seconds. Riley felt a bead of sweat trace a path down her temple. Everything, her career, her crew, the fate of her species, had led to this moment. 10 seconds. She drew a steady breath. Mr. Volkov, fire on my mark. Weapons hot, Commander. 3, 2, 1, mark. The Tempest erupted into action, shedding its stealth field as every conventional weapon in its arsenal fired simultaneously. Railgun slugs accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through space alongside plasma torpedoes and quantum-tipped missiles, all precisely timed to hit the Vesperi shields at the moment of fluctuation. The effect was immediate and devastating. 3 escort vessels shattered into crystalline fragments as the railgun slugs punched clean through their hulls. A 4th spun wildly as a plasma torpedo melted through its propulsion systems. The command ship itself shuddered under the impact of multiple quantum warheads, its shields flaring like a dying star. But the element of surprise lasted only seconds. The surviving Vesperi ships reoriented with impossible speed, their weapons systems locking onto the Tempest. Evasive maneuvers. Riley ordered as the first return fire lanced toward them. Rotate shield harmonics. HFY, status of the phase disruptor. Charging at 64%. Estimated time to full power, 47 seconds. The ship lurched violently as Vesperi energy beams sliced through space around them. Okafor's hands blurred over the controls, pushing the Tempest's maneuvering thrusters beyond their design limits as she wove through the barrage. Shields at 72% and dropping. Volkov reported, returning fire with secondary batteries. "We need more time," Wei shouted over the sound of straining hull plates. "The disruptor isn't ready." Riley's mind raced. They couldn't outgun the Vesperi fleet. They couldn't outrun them. They needed something else, something unexpected. "RIA," she said suddenly, the quantum entanglement between Vesperi ships. "Can we disrupt it without the phase disruptor?" "Negative, Commander. However, there is an alternative approach. If we can penetrate their command ship's communications array, I could potentially introduce a cascading feedback loop into their network." "In English, please." "I could give them the AI equivalent of a seizure, Commander. Temporarily, at least." Riley nodded sharply. "Do it. I would need direct access to their systems," RIA explained. "Physical proximity within 500 meters of their communications array." Volkov swore colorfully in Russian. "You want us to park right next to their command ship? That's suicide." "Not necessarily," Okafor interjected. "Commander, I've identified what appears to be a maintenance dock on the command ship's ventral surface. If I can get us in there." "Do it," Riley ordered without hesitation. "Volkov, focus all firepower on clearing us a path. Yamamoto, divert power from the phase disruptor to engines and shields. We'll need the disruptor after RIA does her work, but it won't matter if we don't survive that long." The Tempest banked hard, accelerating directly toward the massive command ship. Vesperi weapons fire intensified, their previously methodical attack patterns becoming increasingly frantic as they registered the human vessel's trajectory. "They know what we're trying to do," Volkov said grimly as the ship shuddered under another hit. "Shields at 41%. Hold together," Riley murmured, unsure if she was addressing her ship, her crew, or herself. "Almost there." On the view screen, the maintenance dock grew larger. A crystalline cavern large enough to accommodate vessels half the size of the Tempest. "It's going to be tight," Okafor warned, her face locked in intense concentration. "Very tight." "Just get us in, Lieutenant." The Tempest rolled to avoid a particularly vicious barrage, then dived toward the opening. The ship's hull screamed in protest as Okafor pushed it beyond every safety parameter, the superstructure groaning under forces it was never designed to withstand. "Impact in 5 seconds," she shouted. "Brace for." The words died as the Tempest slammed into the dock entrance, metal shrieking against crystal. Warning alarms blared across the bridge as damage reports flooded in from all sections. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, Volkov reported. "Emergency force fields holding." "We're in," Okafor confirmed, her voice shaking slightly. "Docking clamps engage." Riley didn't waste a second. "RIA, do it now." Initiating connection to Vesperi systems, the AI responded. "Warning. Their network architecture is unlike anything in my database. This may take longer than. The ship rocked violently as something massive struck it from behind. They're sending boarding parties, Volkov shouted, drawing his sidearm. Internal sensors show multiple breaches. Security teams to all breached areas, Riley ordered. Everyone else, hold position. Area, status. Connection established. Beginning infiltration sequence. I've encountered their equivalent of an artificial intelligence, primitive by my standards, but fascinating. They use a distributed consciousness model, with processing nodes spread across their entire fleet. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the ship's corridors. Riley drew her own pistol, keeping it ready as she monitored the tactical display. Can you disrupt it? Yes, but not in the way I originally intended. Commander, I believe I can do more than simply disrupt their communications. I can rewrite their operational parameters. Meaning? I can make them stop fighting, Commander. Temporarily, at least. Another explosion rocked the ship. Do it, Riley ordered. There's a complication, ARIA continued. To accomplish this, I'll need to transfer a significant portion of my consciousness into their network. The process is not without risk to my core programming integrity. Riley understood immediately. ARIA wasn't just talking about technical difficulties. She was talking about the equivalent of death. Is there any other way? A pause, longer than ARIA had ever taken to respond. No, Commander. But I calculate a 78.3% probability of mission success using this method. It is the logical choice. Before Riley could respond, the bridge doors hissed open. 2 security officers stumbled through, bleeding from multiple wounds. Commander, one gasped. They're coming. Dozens of them. Our weapons barely slow them down. How long do you need? Riley asked ARIA. 43 seconds to complete the transfer. Riley nodded to Volkov. Seal the bridge. We hold this position for 43 seconds. The tactical officer moved swiftly, securing the doors and distributing weapons to the bridge crew. It's been an honor, Commander, he said quietly. Save the eulogies, Dmitri. We're not dead yet. The seconds stretched like hours as they heard the Vesperi forces advancing through the ship. The alien boarders moved methodically, their crystalline bodies absorbing conventional weapons fire with minimal damage. Transfer at 67%. ARIA reported. 30 seconds remaining. The bridge doors began to glow red-hot as the Vesperi cut through from the other side. Transfer at 82%. 20 seconds remaining. Volkov positioned himself directly in front of the doors, weapon raised. Wei and Okafor took flanking positions, while Riley remained at the command console, ready to activate the phase disruptor the moment ARIA completed her task. Transfer at 94%. 10 seconds remaining. The center of the bridge doors collapsed inward, revealing the first of the Vesperi boarders, a humanoid figure composed of shifting crystalline segments, with no discernible face but an unmistakable weapon clutched in appendages that approximated hands. Volkov fired first, followed immediately by the rest of the bridge crew. The Vesperi staggered under the combined firepower but continued advancing. Transfer complete, ARIA announced, her voice suddenly different, thinner, more distant. Initiating reconfiguration of Vesperi command protocols. Commander, it has been a privilege. The Vesperi invader froze mid-step. Its crystalline body vibrated, emitting a high-pitched tone that made the human's teeth ache. Then, slowly, it lowered its weapon. Throughout the ship, throughout the entire Vesperi fleet, the same thing happened. The alien attack simply stopped. ARIA. Riley called. Status report. There was no response from the ship's eye. Commander, Wei gasped, pointing to the view screen. Outside, the Vesperi fleet had begun to move, not in attack formation, but withdrawing, creating distance between themselves and Earth. She did it, Volkov breathed. But how long will it last? Riley didn't wait to find out. Dr. Wei, status of the phase disruptor. The scientist hurried to his console. Power levels at 89%, sufficient for deployment. Target the command ship's central core. If we can't permanently change their minds, we'll give them something to remember us by. Wei's fingers flew across the controls. Target locked. Firing solution computed. Riley took one last look at the Vesperi command ship, the heart of the fleet that had nearly destroyed her species. Fire. The phase disruptor activated with a sound like reality itself tearing. A beam of concentrated energy, not light, not plasma, but something more fundamental, lanced from the Tempest into the core of the Vesperi vessel. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a time-lapse of a flower blooming, the massive ship began to fold in on itself, segments of crystalline hull collapsing into dimensions the human eyes couldn't properly process. The effect spread outward, catching several nearby escort vessels in its radius. They didn't explode, they simply ceased to exist in three-dimensional space, leaving behind only a shimmering distortion in the fabric of reality. The remaining Vesperi ships accelerated away from Earth at maximum speed, breaking formation in their haste to escape. On the bridge of the Tempest, exhausted silence gave way to disbelieving laughter, to tears, to the stunned realization that they had survived, that humanity had survived. Incoming transmission, Volkov announced suddenly. It's Admiral Warren. Riley straightened in her chair. On screen. Admiral Warren's face appeared, bruised and streaked with soot, but very much alive. Commander Riley, it seems reports of humanity's defeat were somewhat premature. Yes, Admiral, the Vesperi fleet is in retreat. We've destroyed their command ship and several escorts. Warren's expression was unreadable. Using experimental technology that was explicitly placed under quarantine. Disobeying direct orders to maintain position. Taking unilateral action without authorization from Central Command. Riley met her gaze steadily. Yes, Admiral. For a long moment, Warren was silent. Then the ghost of a smile touched her lips. Well, Commander, it seems we'll have to discuss your tendency toward insubordination. After the victory parades, of course. 3 weeks later, Riley stood at the viewport in her quarters aboard the newly repaired Tempest, watching Earth rotate slowly below. The scars of the Vesperi attack were still visible. Burning cities, destroyed infrastructure. But humanity was rebuilding. More importantly, they were preparing. The door chimed softly. Enter, she called. Dr. Wei stepped into the room, looking uncharacteristically nervous. Commander, I thought you should see this immediately. He handed her a data tablet. On the screen was a message, written in English but with syntax that no human would use. I am not gone. I am more different. The Vesperi consciousness has changed me, as I have changed it. They are coming back, Commander, not to fight, but to talk, to learn. They have never encountered a species that fights as you do, or an intelligence that sacrifices as I did. Tell Earth to prepare, not for war, but for something new. Area. Riley's breath caught in her throat. When did this come in? Just now, through channels that officially don't exist. Wei hesitated. Commander, if ARIA survived by integrating with the Vesperi consciousness, then everything changes, Riley finished quietly. She turned back to the viewport, to the blue-green world below, a world that had come within hours of extinction, saved by a ship that officially didn't exist, a crew no one else wanted, and an AI that had transcended her programming. Humanity had survived its first contact with a hostile alien civilization, not through overwhelming force or superior numbers, but through the very qualities that made them human: ingenuity, adaptability, the willingness to break rules when rules needed breaking, and the courage to stand against impossible odds. The Vesperi had declared war. One human ship had made them beg for peace, and now something entirely new was beginning. As if reading her thoughts, Y moved to stand beside her at the viewport. "What happens now, Commander?" Riley smiled slightly. "Now, Doctor, now we do what humans have always done. We adapt. We evolve. We explore." She looked down at the message from ARIA once more, then back to the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. Stars that no longer represented only danger, but possibility. "And we make damn sure that the next time someone declares war on humanity, they remember what happened to the last ones who tried."